Do you have a car in the DC metro area? I do, and sometimes it can be a real bummer. But that's why there's Car Care to Go. Car Care to Go is the future of car maintenance and repair, and it's now as easy as ordering groceries online. They'll pick up your vehicle from your home or office and bring it back when the work is done. You can get your first synthetic oil change for $20.23 with the code FIRST20. Book now at carcaretogo.com.
Today on CityCast DC, Ted Lerner, the 97-year-old patriarch of the family that owns the Washington Nationals, died this week. The team has actually been on the market for months, which means it's already a moment of transition for the organization. Who's likely to wind up owning the team, and what does this mean for the city in general? Chelsea Janes of the Washington Post is here to talk to us about it. It's Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. I'm Michael Schaefer, and this is CityCast DC. Chelsea Janes, you're the national baseball reporter for the Washington Post. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Ted Lerner, the patriarch of the Lerner family, owner of the Nats, passed away on Monday. What kind of legacy does he leave behind?
I think by and large, at least when it comes to Nationals fans, he's leaving a positive one. He got them a title. He got the team up and running here when it first came here, and that was no easy feat, the condition that franchise was in when it moved. So I think by and large that legacy will be a positive one. And I think in the DC area, there are smarter people than me to figure out his influence, but I certainly think his time with the Nationals helped. I mean, it made him someone that people had a reason to really care about.
Back in 2018, Mark Lerner said he would never sell the Nationals. Can you walk us through how we got to this point that it now looks like the family's going to sell?
I think a lot has changed over the last 5 years, in large part because, Mark Lerner's father, Ted, the patriarch of the team and the family, he's sort of the one who spearheaded bringing the Nationals here. So they're sort of at a time of transition where the Lerner family has to decide if this is something they want to stay in the family long term. My understanding is that Ted Lerner in particular was someone who wanted to sell, that he thought, this was the time to get out of the baseball business and sort of go with what they've had. And, I think that family really takes its cues from Ted. And I think the cues that they were getting, especially after the money lost in the pandemic year and some of the debt that they face, I think they just figured maybe this is the time to move on.
And so how do the Lerners work now without their patriarch, especially when it comes to their ownership of the Nats?
It's a great question. I think they are probably trying to figure that out as we speak. That they were a family where, yes, they have adult children who are involved in the franchise, but I think those children were very deferential to Ted Lerner. He was the kind of the influence behind all the big decisions of buying the team, of the biggest moves, and I think of putting the team up for sale in the first place from what we've heard. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now. In the short term, obviously his son Mark will sort of ascend, and he's been kind of involved in the public facing stuff for a long time, so that won't feel new, but we don't know whether there's some kind of documentation of Ted's wishes that they'll have to adhere to if they're on their own and might decide, hey, we don't actually want to sell. We really don't know yet. And I think all of those things are on the table and potentially on the table for the Lerner family right now as well.
Just for some context, who are the Lerners? Like, how'd they wind up owning the team? What's their deal?
So they're real estate moguls. Ted Lerner and his family, as I understand it, sort of founded, created, built up Tyson's Corner and many other mall areas in the DC area. They own a lot of buildings, some near Nats Park, some all over the place in DC. Their claim to fame, I think, is largely Tyson's, but they've got stuff everywhere. And that side of their business is still very much intact, separate from the baseball side. And so that is something that they'll have if they sell the team, either way.
And has their ownership been considered good, on the spectrum of Dan Snyder on one end and I don't know who on the other, where do they sit?
I think they're in the middle. I think that they will be regarded more highly, perhaps in hindsight, than they would be if you polled Nationals fans right now. But for the most part, they built the Nationals from a basically an expansion team. They came from Montreal and had really nothing sort of going for the franchise at that time, built them up into an annual contender. They spent money on that team. They had payrolls well over $100 million. I think maybe more than one year we're in the top 5 in baseball in payroll. That's hard to argue with. Not everyone does that, and they're not in a market that you look at and say is destined to be top 5 in baseball. Their revenues are not commensurate with that. So they spent money, they tried to win, and eventually they did. And I think there are people who wish they'd spent more at times. There are people who wish they had shelled out infinite sums of money to keep stars like Juan Soto, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner around. So it's going to be a mixed bag when you talk to people about them, but I think overall they have been good stewards for the franchise, and there's nothing that can take away that title, which is apparently what Ted Lerner really wanted.
Right. I grew up here in the 80s. We were all Orioles fans, and the conventional wisdom where a lot of people would say, like, oh, Washington is not a baseball town. There's just no way a team will succeed. And if nothing else, they seem to have succeeded on that to at least that level.
Absolutely. I think that there's now more than one generation that's grown up with a baseball team here. You used to see just the Zimmerman T-shirts around, and then it became the Bryce Harper and the Trey Turners, and you sort of have generations of stars now that kids can kind of align themselves with. It's been hard, I think, recently because the team has traded away all its stars and really pared down payroll. It's not the golden era of Nationals baseball right now by any means, but that's not because DC can't support the team. I think the DC is very eager for them to get back on their feet, and they certainly have disproven any notions that this place doesn't have the interest in baseball.
Have you heard about the Dîner en Noir event that's sweeping across the globe? Dîner en Noir events are a members-only, fully curated, all-Black attire, 3-part dining experience held at a secret location in cities worldwide. Part fully immersive dining experience, part art and business networking opportunity, and part community fundraising event supporting 2 arts programs and a small business development nonprofit in each of the host cities, Dîner en Noir events are a fun, elegant, not to mention memorable way to support your community. Secure your membership today to join Den DC at a secret location in the nation's capital and experience this epic evening of opulent flair, gourmet cuisine, music, arts and culture, entrepreneurship, and community support. For more information, to secure your membership, or become a partnering sponsor or vendor, please visit www.dinerenoir.com/DC. That's www.dinerenoir.com/DC. And enter coupon code HEYDC for 15% off your membership. They look forward to hosting you at Dîner en Noir, Washington, D.C., celebrating arts, business, and community.
FrameBridge, the custom framing company, is the perfect way to refresh your space for the new year by framing everything that matters to you. That's because they can FrameBridge just about anything. Game day jerseys, selfies, your anniversary dinner menu, artwork, your favorite movie poster, a love letter from the people at CityCast DC, anything. Here's how it works. You go to framebridge.com and upload a digital photo. If you have a physical piece to frame, like a poster, they will send you complimentary packaging to safely mail it into their owned and operated studio where the framing will begin. You preview the piece online in dozens of frame styles. You choose your favorites. The experts at FrameBridge will custom frame your piece and deliver your finished piece directly to your door ready to hang. And instead of paying hundreds, their prices start at $39. You can order online at framebridge.com, or you can shop at a FrameBridge store near you, which if you live in DC means a whole bunch of stores. Get started today. Frame your photos or give someone the perfect gift. Go to framebridge.com and place your order now. All right, so here we are, and they're looking for the exits. Who has considered buying the team? There were like 28 groups interested at some point.
There have been a lot of people that have come through. It's a really interesting process in that every time a bidder is interested, they have to sign non-disclosure agreements simply to get in the door and look at the finances. And that makes sense, but it makes it hard to tell who is actually interested, unless somebody outside of those non-disclosure agreements tells us. It's hard to piece together. But there were people like Michael B. Kim, who's a Korean billionaire, made his money initially at Carlyle and then branched off. There was a mortgage mogul named Stanley Middleman who also came through. There are groups that we have not yet identified that came through and looked at the finances and signed that non-disclosure agreement and got that far in the process. But as far as we know, no one has bid. And the quirk about the process is the learners don't say, hey, we want this much money. Who's going to give it to us? People look at the finances and they bid. And if the learners don't get the money they want, they don't have to sell. So we don't know who got serious enough to even consider a bid. We have not heard that there ever was one even. But at least a handful of groups were serious enough to sign those NDAs. And the one person that continues to seem serious enough is Ted Leonsis, who owns the Wizards and the Washington Capitals and the Mystics. He continues to be very interested. He's somebody that has wanted to create sort of a sports media empire in DC for years. And I think he senses this might be his best opportunity.
So would he be a good fit for the team? What's the consensus on that?
I don't think anyone really knows. I think it's hard to tell exactly how much, frankly, money he has at his disposal. You know, how much money he would have after adding another team to his portfolio. I think people who watch the Capitals regularly would say that he's been a fine owner. They've won during his tenure. I think people who watch the Wizards would say he's been lackluster and that they should have done better. But the things we know about him, he's not somebody who changes things just to change them. He's generally fairly patient. And the thing about Ted Leonsis and the Nationals is that he knows the Lerner family really well. That's probably a situation where, you know, if Mark Lerner wanted to continue being involved in the team, continue to have a stake, they'd probably let him keep it. So that's a comfortable fit in many ways. And he knows the city. And I think particularly with the Nationals and sort of the fan base they've built here, you want somebody who understands why they matter, who understands the history, who understands the DC market. And, you know, I don't know, Ted Leonsis seems like somebody who fits that bill.
So one of the other names that got bandied about for a while was David Rubenstein, who's another DC billionaire and quite a well-known figure around town. Is he still in the mix? And what do you understand about that?
He, you know, at first, and as recently as December, I think, was somebody that seemed to be on a path toward partnering with Ted Leonsis, toward being a part of a group that would have been spearheaded by Leonsis, and Rubenstein chips in, and that's how that goes. We recently have heard that there's no arrangement close there. It's certainly not a done deal that would be the format of any group, but as far as we know, he still wants to be involved, and he was in talks with Leonsis, and they seem to have some understanding of who could give what in a group like that, so we'll see if that happens. But our understanding at this time is that the plan has been for, if Leonsis buys that team, you'll probably see Rubenstein involved as well.
So DC's got two kind of celebrity sports owners, right? I don't think most people, if like they bumped into one of the Lerners on the street, they might not even recognize them. But Ted Leonsis is a famous guy and Dan Snyder is a famous guy. And the one is beloved. Everyone who's met him says, oh, you know, he gave me his email address. It's like that sort of interaction. And the other one is widely scorned. What's the difference? Why is that?
You know, I think Dan Snyder, number one, has run what was kind of a treasured franchise, not only in Washington, but for the NFL, sort of into the ground. It hasn't put money into the stadium, hasn't built winning teams. And then there's obviously a lot of extracurricular things happening there with, you know, racism, you know, sexual harassment allegations in the organization, just general dysfunction that he has overseen and not stopped. And I think people are sort of sick of seeing that, especially in a town where, you know, accountability is sort of a big deal here. And I think, you know, he's someone who hasn't been accountable to anyone. So I think it's twofold. I think if he were a terrible guy and that team was really good, it would be a little more tolerable. But he happens to be a terrible guy who has run that franchise into the ground. And, you know, they can't fill their stadium. They haven't had a legitimate chance at winning in the postseason in a very long time. And he's just not a good faith operator. I think Ted Leonsis has proven that he cares about the city, and it's sort of easy to believe that he is trying to do what is best for the organization and the people who care about it.
Yeah, one of our guests in a previous episode said winning is the ultimate disinfectant.
Yes.
And but we never had a chance with Snyder to test that notion.
Not yet. Yeah, I don't think we will.
Wait, has there been any like wacky pop culture celebrity appendage to any of these ownership groups the way there's been in some of the Commanders talk? There's no Matthew McConaughey?
No.
I wonder if that says more about baseball than anything else.
I think it does, yep.
Spring training is around the corner. How does the kind of limbo, the looking for a new owner thing actually affect the team day to day or month to month either in their operations on the field or off the field for that matter?
It's a great question. We've seen them really slash the payroll from, I guess, 2021 to this year. They didn't spend a lot this winter, but part of that is the cycle that the team is in. They're relying on a lot of young players. They need to see what they can do. But I think part of it is the Lerner family both showing you that they felt like they took some financial hits in the pandemic year and after, not being willing to spend as much as they were before. But also it's part of that uncertainty. It's do you want to spend a ton of money and saddle a new owner with contracts that owner did not agree to pay? And they probably don't. And the Nationals also have, and I think this is fairly common from what I understand, but they have some debt on the books from contracts they owe to Max Scherzer. They owe money to Steven Strasburg, to Scherzer, to a few players for years to come. And it adds up quickly. So anyone who's buying the team is going to inherit that, presumably. And the Lerners don't want to increase that anymore and make the team more unattractive in that way. So you're seeing them spend less, for sure. And it also puts the people running the team in a very awkward position. Mike Rizzo has been the GM since, I think, 2010 or before, but his contract expires after this year because how can you sign up to work for owners that may not be here? And how, as owners, can you sign someone up to work long-term when you don't know you'll be here?
Right.
So it just puts everyone in limbo, and I know that it just makes everyone in that front office wonder how long they'll be there, and that's not a comfortable way to operate for anyone.
Wait, I don't know if you've done reporting on any of this, but do you have a sense of like when the fans are playing like fantasy owner in their own heads, who do they want to have on the team?
I mean, I think that the fans would want anyone who's going to spend, like Steve Cohen is up in New York, billionaire who just wants to win at all costs and was a big fan as a kid. I don't know who that is. I think, perfect world, somebody like Jeff Bezos, who's got seemingly endless resources, is ideal, but he's not going to buy the Washington Nationals. It's a different kind of market. You're probably not going to attract that kind of person, but I think ideal world, you want a baseball obsessed billionaire. I mean, it's funny because Steve Cohen pretty much is that, up the way there. And it makes everybody else sort of think that that's a template that they can reasonably expect to find in every owner. And it's just not.
It's nice. All of us want that in a boss too.
Yeah, no doubt.
Wait, who do you fantasize about for owner? Do you have
Myself?
like a secret dream?
No, I don't know. Someone who doesn't cause controversy and spends and helps them win, I think would be best for me. Fewer stories, all baseball, good baseball, that kind of thing. It's a very selfish fantasy there.
Wait, so you don't want some jerk who's going to like run the thing into the ground and you can like dig up dirt and investigate all the skullduggery?
And maybe I should, but I've watched what we've had to handle with Dan Snyder for years, and people age on that beat. They really do.
Chelsea Janes, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
And before you go, some quick news. DC leaders have just cut the ribbon on a new 100-unit apartment building near RFK Stadium. It's called the Ethel. The building combines a place to stay with on-site case management and job training. The city says it will, quote, help residents transition out of homelessness, unquote. The opening comes right as DC prepares to clear the huge McPherson Square tent encampment later today. Meanwhile, nurses at George Washington University Hospital are trying to unionize. Like healthcare workers across the country, they've been crunched since the pandemic, with the workload compounded by a staff exodus. GW is one of 3 DC hospitals where nurses are not yet organized. The others are Sibley Hospital and Georgetown University Hospital. Also, a zoo in Northern Virginia is reopening this Friday with a massive light show representing wildlife migrations around the world. The 30-acre zoo was previously called Roar's Zoofari, and it's reopening now as a nonprofit zoo. It's going to be called Nova Wild. It'll be open from Thursday to Sunday every week, and yes, it will still have a drive-through safari component. And lastly, your DC life hack of the day, courtesy of our guest Chelsea Janes. If you are driving to Nats Park, people, you do not need to use stadium parking. You can park on the hill, and you can walk. It's not very far. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend, maybe one who's excited about spring training and baseball season. Also, subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye. I would love it if it was Rubinson. We could have like lectures about presidents before games and stuff like that. It would be awesome.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. Yeah.
I'm kidding.